آغاز ما تویی و سرانجام ما تویی بی تو مسیر عشق به آخر نمیرسد.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. When we hear the word Karbala, often the thing that comes to our mind is that Karbala is a university. And we hear this often, that from Karbala there is a lesson for each and every single one of us to take, be it the elderly, be it the youth, the women, or the children. But one of the personalities that really stands out from Karbala is none other than Bibi Zainab salamullahi alayha. Now, often when we hear about Bibi Zainab, the words mountain of patience comes to mind. However, unfortunately for some of us, when we hear of Bibi Zainab, the idea of somebody who was madluma, who was trialed and wailing and crying and upset, but she acted upon her responsibility, but somebody who was generally very disturbed comes to mind. However, when we look at Bibi Zainab salamullahi alayha, we understand that there are certain qualities from her life, and especially from the tragedy of Karbala, that are lessons for each and every single one of us to take. And one of the biggest lessons from her life and from the events that transpired after the event of Karbala is acting upon her responsibility. This is the same Bibi Zainab salamullahi alayha who covered herself in the most modest way possible, who observed her hijab in the most perfect way possible. Yet we see that after Karbala, the zalim and the tyrants of the time, after snatching her hijab, what did she do? Did she sit down and just silently and cowardly stay at the back and hide away? No, she didn't. We find that when Bibi Zainab salamullahi alayha entered the courtyard of Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, this zalim tyrant wanted to show who he was. And so at that point, he looked at her and he saw that she was covered by women who were surrounding her. And he realized that she's an important personality. So he said to her, "Man anti? Who are you?" Bibi Zainab, a mountain of patience, but also a courageous lady, decided not to reply to him. She looked away silently. Once again he repeated, "Man anti? Who are you?" Again she quietly looked away, as if you're not even worthy of my reply. For a third time he said to her, "Man anti?" And again she silently looks away. At this point, Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad is getting angry. What's happening over here? The roles have shifted. Who is the hakim? Who is the ruler? And who is the oppressed? Who is the asir over here? Who is the prisoner? Bibi Zainab is standing firm in that situation. The people around are starting to whisper, what's going on? Ubaydullah is getting more and more angry. And so he decides that this is a lady. Let me just belittle her and make fun of her. She'll start crying and this issue will finish. So he decides to make fun of her and he decides to say to her, كيف رأيت صنع الله بأخيك وأهل بيتك? How do you find what Allah has done to you and to your brother and to your Ahlul Bayt? At this point, the famous line that we hear from Bibi Zainab salamullahi alayha comes, where she says, "Ma ra'aytu illa jamila." I see nothing but beauty. Now when we hear this, it's easy to think that in that situation, when the zalim of the time comes to you, you'd say something like that. But just imagine, put yourself in her shoes in that situation. Something like that has happened to you. You've lost everybody, not just anybody, the most dearest people to you, the Imam of your time. And her reply was, "Ma ra'aytu illa jamila." I see nothing but beauty. We see that this same Bibi Zainab, when she enters the courtyard of Yazid, look at how she addresses him. She says, "Who are you? What are you?" As if to say that you are nothing. You are the same person, she says to Yazid, whom my grandfather freed your grandfather as a slave after the conquest of Makkah. Of course, we know that in history this happened. She said to him, "Who are you? You are nothing. Do you think that by you being in power in this situation, our remembrance is going to get forgotten? You are the same person who my grandfather freed your grandfather when he was a slave. So we see that Bibi Zainab salamullahi alayha, a mountain of patience, but also a courageous, brave lady who knew her responsibility and stood with the Imam of her time. We pray inshallah that Allah gives us the tawfiq to be able to understand the teachings of Islam and to be able to defend the Imam of our time and stand bravely and courageously as this noble lady did in her time. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.